Thank you, John. So thank you everybody for joining, and especially thank you to Ina and Paul for putting together the presentation. It's really great timing for the nutrient management project to be sharing the lessons that they've been learning from the first few years of taking a co-innovation approach in this highly complex and contested area. And so I think it'll be a great opportunity, especially across the different innovation projects, to sort of see, hey, if you also experienced similar challenges and also successes, and possibly how you've addressed some of these challenges that might help Ina and Paul as they continue with the project. So I'll hand over now to Ina and Paul to go through and talk about the project and the background, and especially those sort of lessons that they've been learning as they go. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and indeed we are going to take you through our presentation on nutrient management, the case study in Canterbury, and we do have two parts to the presentation as John outlined. First, I will talk about the context of the activities here in Canterbury and how we have put co-innovation into practice, and then after giving you the chance to ask some questions for us, we'll move to part two, where we discuss some lessons learned and some points that we would do differently or adopt in any new projects. So first, a bit of the background. Nutrient management obviously has got to do with water quality in New Zealand. We have seen a decline in the water quality, and that has prompted the government to write a policy statement on freshwater management. And that sets the requirements that there will be nutrient limits to land use, but also targets for water quality. The national government is not setting the targets for regional scales. That is up to the regional governments. So at the moment, all regional councils in New Zealand are developing and implementing, in some cases, regulation. The primary industries are involved in this because we need to make sure that the policies are actually workable, that we continue to have viable industries, but also that we achieve a practice change in our industries that actually do make a difference, so that water quality targets are being met. In Canterbury, in our Canterbury context, we are working with Environment Canterbury, that's the regional council here. The outline of the policy is that in all of Canterbury, and we call the under-allocated catchments, the green ones on the map, that means that water quality is met in those areas, but we're still asking farmers to meet good management practice. Then there are regions where water quality standards are less than required. The orange areas are very close to the limits, and the red areas are already over-allocated. So the nutrient loss from agriculture there is higher than what is required to meet water quality standards. In those areas, good management practice is probably not enough, and more restrictive rules will be implemented. So this whole issue is an ideal topic for a co-innovation approach because it is a complex issue. Many factors are impacting on water quality, and many stakeholders are involved around it as well. We need cohesion from the paddock up to the policy landscape, and we need to include farmers, rural professionals, industry good bodies, policy makers, so a whole bunch of different people, different drivers. So to address this in 2012, the Lincoln team from DairyNZ decided that we needed to create an action plan because we had here a very clear problem and we needed to work towards a common goal and be inclusive, working with other people so that we were actually achieving what we needed to achieve. And that resulted in an action plan with a couple of steps defined. We wanted to identify which individuals we needed to work with. So say this is a stakeholder analysis basically. Who are representing the dairy industry, where would we need practice change, and which farmers, for example, in the red zones we needed to be targeted specifically because they would be really affected by the changing regulations. We also decided we needed to put all the current knowledge together. What do we already know about nutrient management and that farmers could use immediately? But another big step was that good practice management, the good management practice, the GMPs. If you ask different people what they mean with good management practice, then you would get different stories. So it was very clear that we needed to have good definitions of this. What do we mean with it? Demonstrate it then to other people and communicate to the wider public what farmers are doing to achieve that good practice. And then for the farmers who need to do more, we needed to have a support system in place that they can change and still have viable farms. We probably had research questions, so we wanted to develop a research agenda and at the same time build capability in the industry to make sure that the support for the farmers was available. So in the course of the next year or so, we have embedded all these actions in a whole range of projects and programs. And basically all actions have a home now. And the three that I want to mention specifically are the Matrix of Good Management. That was a project instigated by Environment Canterbury to define what good management practice is and then to estimate the nutrient loss from typical Canterbury farms when they were at GMP. Once those good management practices were defined, they needed to be implemented on farm. So the vehicle to do that is a farm environment plan, and for the dairy industry we call them the sustainable milk plans. They are a document of the risks of a specific farm and how that farmer intends to address these. And for communication and development of support, but also researching new options for farmers when they had to go beyond GMP. We set up a huge program proposal for reduced nitrate leaching, and that was to research those new options for the farmers who needed to do more. That program really embraced co-innovation. It's a large program, as I just said. 3 industries are involved. That is arable, sheep and beef, and dairy. And we're working with 6 organizations that are partnering in this program. And they're Crown Research Institutes, a university, and industry good bodies. And in total, the program has 31 projects. And one of those projects I want to highlight specifically because that's really where the co-innovation approach is also visible. That's the Monitor Farm Network. And that's a network of farmers across Canterbury because we wanted farmers' input in the program, and specifically for 4 points that I'm going to highlight now. The farmers will give input for research. They help us with the decisions around the research direction because we want to have proper options coming out of this research, so practicality has to be there. Also, farmers will bring in their own knowledge and their experiences of what they've trialed on farm, but also to show other farmers what these farmers are already doing. We have a monitoring system in place. So first of all, monitoring what the farms were doing at present, demonstrate the current practice, but then when they start to adopt the new options that developed in the program, we will demonstrate the change. And important there is if the benefits that we have seen in trials, are they actually being kept when it's scaled up on commercial farms. Another point, another role for this monitor farm network is that they help to identify barriers to adoption. That we may have nice options in an experimental way, but what are risks or unintended consequences when you scale them up to commercial farms? It won't be the first time that we see that a particular treatment or management works in an experiment, but once you ask farmers to implement that, they use it in a completely different way than what you envisaged, and the results might be quite different than what the research had shown. So that's something that we really need to keep track of. Farmers also help to identify which skills are required to implement the new options, and that we then can make sure that resources that are needed for that are available to them. And finally, the farmers have a role in sharing the story with field days or discussion groups or their input in conferences, that other farmers hear how these farmers have managed to implement these options. When we developed this approach to the program, we have asked rural professionals if they thought that having this monitor farm network embedded in a research program would help, and their feedback has been very positive. So what you see in this graph is the results of a workshop with NZ IPIM, that's the New Zealand Institute of Primary Industry Management, and their members are rural professionals from banking, consultants, fertilizer or other industry reps, etc. These people were very confident that a monitor farm network would help with setting the research direction to make sure that it's practical and that the results coming out of the research would be relevant to the farmers. They were also very positive that the monitor farm network would help to achieve adoption of those new options. Again, only a single person was a little skeptical, but the rest really thought it would help to show how new options might work on farm, and half of those are actually saying that it's crucial to have those farmers involved to achieve adoption. So now I'll just do a stock take of how far we got in the 2.5 years since we started rolling the defined actions out. First of all, the good management practices have been defined. You see on the right side and the front cover of a booklet that has been published by Environment Canterbury. In the MGM project, we managed to have one booklet with industry agreed narratives of good management practice, and they are underwritten by the 6 industries involved in the project. So that was quite a massive achievement, I would say. One booklet underwritten by 6 industries. For the sustainable milk plans, we have taken those good management practices and translated them in actions in those plans for farms, and these are being rolled out at the moment. 305 have already been implemented on farms, another 166 are on the way, but we'll need hundreds more, so that's going to be a massive, oh, something happens to the slides, a massive task for the next years. Then the output from the MGM project are embedded in the proposed policy framework that's been notified earlier this year by Environment Canterbury, but unfortunately, due to time pressures mainly, some of the output is contested, so it's not an industry agreed policy, definitely not, it's contested. The monitor farm network that we proposed for the Foragers for Reduced Nitrate Leaching program has been established. We have 9 farmers involved. They cover the whole of Canterbury. There are 4 dairy farms, 2 arable farms, 2 sheep and beef, and 1 mixed dairy arable. And the research program, the experiments are also well underway. We've had quite a number of experiments with very promising results. so it looks like we're heading in the right direction. And at the same time, we have communicated really well about what we've been doing and also what the policy changes might be. We've had meetings across Canterbury with farmers, well attended, in total more than 760 registered attendees, so probably a bit more have been there. And we've had very good media coverage as well. It's been very clear that having farmers involved in a research program is very attractive for the media to actually talk about that research, because they have people on the ground and real stories to tell. So that has helped a lot. So that is basically about what we have set out to do and what we have achieved. So I would like to give the opportunity to people now to ask some questions.
And questions we have. So thanks folks for typing those in. So the first one is, how many monitor farmers are there and how did you actually select them?
We have 9 monitor farms. Probably that question was then typed in before I gave the list. And the selection of those was a huge process as well, because we first developed a list of criteria of what we wanted to have out of it, and that list was created with people from extension, development, research, so that it was clear what the requirements were going to be. So we needed good communicators. We needed people, of course, who were committed to achieving a good environmental impact. But they also had to have a particular standing in the region, that people were identifying with them as being good farmers, as examples of how other farmers also would like to be able to run their farms. And with that list of criteria, we went out and asked people in the various industries around Canterbury if they knew people who would fit those criteria. So we got a long list of names, and the names that appeared more than once, so that were coming back often, is those farmers were then targeted with interviews. And from those interviews, interviewed farmers, we selected, I think we had 10, that we have 10 to start off with, and had then a workshop with those farmers to really make sure they understood what the requirements were going to be. And then for one farmer, it appeared that, especially around the financials, it would be a problem for them to have that all in the open, because that is one of the requirements, of course, as well. If you want to communicate what those farmers are doing and what they're achieving, those farmers have to give completely open books to everybody to see what they're doing and what the performance of the farm is.
That's good. Now, to test your PowerPoint skills, can you just go back a few slides, I think it's like 4 or 5, to the one headed Monitor Farm Network, and it outlines the barriers to adoption. Let's just go back. Yes, that's it, isn't it? That's great. One of the attendees was just wanting to read the words again for that. And while they're doing that, there's another question here. So what's been the reaction within DairyNZ to the success of this project? And is the co-innovation approach seen as part of that success, or perhaps as all of that success?
Well, a lot of people from DairyNZ are involved with the program, and others are following it. So reactions have been very positive. There are a number of people, of course, who are wondering if having a monitor farm network, for example, included, if that is really beneficial or not. Because, yeah, most of the DairyNZ staff will say that they are working with farmers anyway. So is it necessary to make it explicit this way? We would argue yes, it is, but if that indeed gives us an advantage later on when rolling out those new options. That still remains to be seen, of course. And
Sure.
the second half of the question was, sorry?
To what degree did they see the co-innovation approach as being part of that success?
Yeah, that is the question. Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay.
So then there's a new question.
Yep, so there's a new question here. So there are various views in the theory regarding stakeholder engagement. More is better, or moderation in engagement. How did you choose how much was enough?
It's also a function, I think, of time available. So we'll get to that when Paul presents the lessons learned. You can only do so much. What we endeavored to do is to be very open about what was the intention and what the program was going to do, or it's the same with MGM as well. It's been very open and public with presentations and articles during the project as well, to say how far we got. So everybody who wanted to say something was invited to do that and have input. But being completely active and making sure that everybody is around the table, we have not been able to do that from a time point of view. But we also had discussions about who are the most important people to have at the table at what stage. So it's a more staged approach than starting with everybody right from scratch.
That's good. We do have a few more questions, but I think they might be covered in Paul's section. So how about we hand over to Paul now?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so let's skip forward again now and talk a little bit about lessons learned along that journey. So I'm going to touch on capability, communication and trust, and how those contribute to a shared vision, and then finish up with a little bit about flexibility and how that's really important to make sure that the program project stays relevant in a changing context. So in terms of capability, the ability to build relationships is just as important as technical knowledge. So existing relationships and understanding of each other's context helped Ina in particular pull together what is a very large program in FRNL and what was a really short time frame, and everyone got on board with that clear common vision. Another one for capability is that farm systems researchers are quite scarce, so there was a few people there that had significant contributions to make in both the MGM and FRNL projects, and then workloads coincided, and that caused high workloads for a few people and did slow down progress in those projects. In terms of communication, scale really requires a greater effort. So for FRNL, it's just simply too large, with that 6 program partners and 30 plus projects and potentially 100 plus people involved. That informal communication just breaks down, and that's not only within an organisation, but in particular between organisations which often aren't co-located in the same building, so you don't just bump into people and have a chat. So dedicated communication teams are required, but they don't just need to be there, they actually need to be quite active as well. Another lesson around there was flat organisational structures are helpful, so i.e. not too hierarchical. The more people that know what's going on and can essentially be delegated to make a decision, the better, because it means that you're now not dependent on a few key individuals being there for progress to be made. A commitment from the whole team is required to ensure that shared vision continues. So I guess around that, you have a large program that's a long-term program, a 6-year program. Personnel change is inevitable, so it really requires a lot of effort and commitment to bring new personnel up to speed with what that shared vision and what those shared goals are. And it can't just be a few key individuals like project leaders responsible for that. That really does need to be from that whole group, which of course requires commitment from those people, because after a while it might for them appear repetitive to keep talking about the shared vision because they've already bought into that, but they need to keep doing that in order for everyone to stay on that same page. In terms of trust, that's really critical for co-innovation type projects and working together, and so along with that you really need to respect each other's needs. So as a couple of examples there, how the end product was going to be used in MGM wasn't clear at the start, and towards the end that started to cause friction and a lack of trust between stakeholders. And for FRNL, there was changes to the work plans that were required, and we'll touch on flexibility in a minute, but these need to be discussed and agreed on amongst all of the parties that are involved. And despite relationships being built, and what actually can take quite a bit of time to build a strong relationship, it's quite easily lost as well. So for MGM, tight timeframes meant that once we started getting to the pointy end of the project, decisions started being made that were not agreed on or supported by all parties, and that's resulted in output that's contested, like Ina's mentioned already. In terms of flexibility, regular evaluations of progress are really important. So for both MGM and FRNL, regular team meetings clarified what needed doing or changing in a timely way. And I suppose that relates back to that, keeping that shared vision alive in a changing context as well. In FRNL, Reflexive Monitor assisted with collecting relevant data for monitoring and evaluation of progress, and we sort of found that a lot of that information is stored away in your head and you're kind of thinking about it already, but it does, sitting down with someone and asking the right questions does sort of help to frame up and put down on paper some actions that you might need to make to change, which may have happened at some point, but perhaps wouldn't have happened in quite such a timely way or with such a coordinated approach. Flexibility is necessary to stay in tune with changing context and respond to new information that comes along. So for FRNL, one of the 3 research aims there was reorganised quite early on in the program as other viewpoints were brought into the program. And as another example there, there is funding set aside for some farm systems work in the latter stages of that program that wasn't clearly defined at the program outset, and that was to be informed and project plans developed as new information became available from the first several years of the program. As an example from MGM, it didn't respond all that well to changing requirements as that policy framework started to become clearer, and that caused some disagreement, as we've already mentioned earlier. So, based on those, what would we do differently next time in our, if we were going to put together another co-innovation type project? So, including that monitoring and evaluation of progress and the processes is really important to make sure that you do have flexibility built in to be able to respond to changing context or new information. For accountability, the use of no-go and go type points and process type milestones instead of relying on technical deliverables as much, and Greg Lambert had a good analogy the other day when he sort of described it like climbing a tree, and when you get to a major fork, well, if your deliverable is a technical type one sitting on the left-hand branch, but based on your new information, actually you think you should be going off on the right-hand branch, then the use of no-go points would have helped out there to make sure that you're staying on what you think is the most relevant. Facilitate learning about each other's contexts, requirements and goals, and I guess just thinking there around basically understanding where each other are coming from. So we heard about Environment Southland a year or so ago sent some of their personnel out to spend some time on farm, and apparently were blown away by how many, the sheer number of decisions farmers need to make, and then how external influences like debt, etc., influence that decision making. So that's really important when you are in a project with a lot of partners with different positions and different viewpoints. When you're trying to get an agreed position on something, then compromise is probably inevitable. So if you understand where each other are coming from, you're more likely to be able to suggest options that are acceptable to other parties. You need to include resources for that relationship management, extension and communication, which is really important but often overlooked. Some of those things we've identified that we don't have good answers for is how to maintain that shared vision when that context changes, and that's both overall or even within one partner or a stakeholder. How to provide sufficient time for networking and communication that we've talked about is so important. How to alleviate that reliance on a few key individuals, so progress can be made when they're not available, and how to assess if benefits outweigh the costs of co-innovation, if the co-innovation approach to achieving regional targets for water quality. And so these are some of the things we'd like to get some feedback and discussion from the group. So that's it from me. John?
Yeah, that's good. Thanks, Paul. So we've really only got 5 minutes left, so I've got a few questions here, so maybe we'll just work through those. So the first one, now let me get the terminology right here. Can you tell us how did the Matrix of Good Management project influence what was being done in the Forages for Reduced Nitrate Leaching project? So yeah, how did it affect that?
I'll hand that one over to Ina to explain.
Yes, that is certainly an influence there, because with the policy framework, it was obvious that for every farmer it's required to go to good management practice. So what we defined already in 2012 that we wanted to demonstrate good management practice, that is included in the monitor farm network, because yeah, we can utilize the monitoring on their farms to show other people what they are doing and what the impact of that is. And on top of that, it was clear that in some regions good management practice is not sufficient, so that new options were needed, and in a relatively short time. So from that is which directions then to go and look for solutions. That has been discussed as well and has guided the topics in the program.
Okay. And perhaps another question for you, Ina, is regarding the monitor farmers. Can you give some examples of how they actually influence the research direction?
We will have the main influence will come in the next half a year when we're developing that new set of work for the farm systems work that we haven't defined yet what we're going to do with that budget. But from the start, we have had workshops with these farmers to discuss possibilities for them, what they might be able to implement on farm, and the ease of use of alternative pasture species in their current grazing management comes up regularly. And also, if we want to use other crops, how that then has to fit in a whole crop rotation, for example, of arable farmers. So with their input, we have chosen treatments of experiments, so which kind of crop rotations are relevant. Also, the whole modeling work that has been done together with the farmers. Their farms have been put in the models as being the baselines, and then they brought up scenarios that they thought they might be able to implement on their farm, and then with the models we could estimate what then the impact would be on profitability or environmental impact.
Great. And possibly the last question now, do you feel like your relationships or trust is on a personal level, or has it now moved to an organisational level? And if it is at the organisational level, how did you manage to do that?
Sorry, I didn't get that question. Can you start?
That's okay.
Yeah.
Sure. So do you feel like your relationships and trust is on a personal level, or has it moved to an organisational level now?
It's in FRNL, it's definitely moved to organizational level, and that is visible from how engaged the program management committee and the governance committees are with the program. That when there are issues, they really nut them out and come with solutions. And to the extent that if one party is not able to do something, that another organization actually picks it up. So that's definitely organization level. But you can only achieve that, of course, if you've got people in the room who are willing to have those discussions and take it back to their organization. So that personal level is always part of it.
Good. Okay. Thank you. And just a comment from Denise is saying that she's really enjoyed today's webinar, and it's brilliant to get your list of what to do next time. So she really appreciated your lessons learned. Time has almost run out, so I might pass over now to James to give some concluding comments.
Thanks, John, and thank you to Ina and Paul for that great presentation and being open about sharing some of the lessons learned and some of the challenges that remain going forward. They're all good questions for the whole Primary Innovation Project and others to think about how we might be able to tackle those, especially those lessons around what you do next time. And that might be food for thought as well around opportunities midway through a program to do things a bit differently going forward. So again, thank you very much, Ina and Paul, for sharing those lessons and for everybody contributing questions and great insights from other projects as well. So hopefully everybody enjoys the rest of the day. Thanks a lot.